Welcome everybody to In the Chute round 18. I'm joined here with my dad, and today I'm starting it off. All right, Dad, what do you got?
Well, you're a pretty smooth operator there. Usually we just stare at each other for a little bit till somebody says
I
something.
know.
That's awesome.
I don't do that. I don't play games.
Well, hey, let's do this. Let's put a question in the chute today for you.
Yeah.
So you usually ask me something or would bring me something to stump the chump. Let's do something to you or for you. How, so you're in the Army, and obviously you're trained, but you didn't come trained with certain skills, or some have been
Or
developed,
any.
but what kind of skills, what kind of things have helped you or not helped, coming from a ranching or agriculture background into the military, particularly where you're at with your branch in the Army of Med Services.
Yeah. So the first thing is being an officer. It prepared me poorly for being able to supervise and manage because it was everything about, hey, let's get this done physically. Officers don't do that. They make their guys do that. I'll throw it out there, and anybody who's been in the military, they'll be like, yeah, he's absolutely right. And the one thing that was useful is marksmanship. Uh, Grew up in a hunting family, and we all support the right to bear arms very liberally. and so being able to shoot was a nice thing because every time I went to the range, I knew how to shoot. I never had issues with qualification. In fact, there were a couple of times as a cadet, I got pulled to the side and told, "Hey, you just did really well. Go help them now." I'm like, "Dang it!"
So
so
so when you were doing some of your internships as a cadet when you're in college,
yeah,
you did some things like you were at Fort Knox.
yeah. So that was
Where else?
actually that. It wasn't an internship. It was a small training, but I got stuck next to a girl that she was confident in how she was shooting, but then it didn't put on paper very well. She was missing it completely, and so I had an NCO who's also, for those who don't know, it's a sergeant. So he just came over. He's like, "Hey man, you just did really well. You could clearly have a good idea of what you're doing. Can you help her out while I go try and help others?" So it was one of those things. He was trying to get the max training out so he could get
Sure.
5 or 6 cadets figured out and zeroed, and then they could go to the range. And he's like, "Hey, I just need you to help her out." So I did that, and that was nice. But the other skills too are, and I wrote them down because we did discuss this before you started asking me. But um, I didn't realize how useful egg kids are um, until I got one as a soldier. Uh, I didn't have any soldiers who had come from an agriculture community at all, and I finally got one just before I left as a platoon leader, and he was from Ohio, and his family did hogs and sheep and some crops. And like I wrote some stuff down. You're able to wake up early, no problem. Uh, you have some integrity. You're able to be responsible for things, and I just know you're going to get it done, no problem.
Hmm.
Uh, you got a good work ethic. I always know I can count on you. And then you think ahead. So like this kid, we gave him some tasks and stuff like that. We're like, "Hey, I need you to go do this." He's like, "Okay." So one thing we told him was, "Hey, I need you to do commo stuff. So all the communications equipment, I need you to make sure it works. I need to make sure things are put together. I need you to make sure that when we go on an operation or an exercise, you can always grab that stuff, put it together, and it's easy so that anybody who's not used to the communication stuff, they can pick it up, put it in the Humvee, and we can rock and roll." And he's like, "Okay, sounds good." And he took it and he flew with it. It was great. No other
But
person had done that, and they had done it well. He was the first person to go, "Oh, this is broken. Let me go try and fix it." Other people would just be like, "Yeah, it's broken," and they throw it to the side. And
that's typical. I mean, you've got to be able to fix your own stuff.
and that's what it was. It was the follow through, and I think that came from where he was, because him and I connected a lot, and we got along really well. He ended up being one of my favorite soldiers, and he was one of those guys that could always come up to me, no problem, say, "Hey, sir, here's what I'm thinking. It's broken or whatnot. Is it okay if I go do this?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely. That's great. You're doing what I want you to do." And stuff like that worked out really well. So that's what, at least to this point, that I think is what has helped me be as I don't know if I'd say successful, but I haven't crashed and burned yet in the military.
You know, that's interesting you say that because, you know, I always hear how guys that leave the state because they're, you know, it's tough to get employment here. I mean, it's really tough. And guys have went to California and they say, you know, you mentioned that you're from a farmer ranch. They'll hire you on the spot, whatever.
Almost always, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like you know, I've never experienced that myself because I mean, I always just had a job, but maybe they hired me because I was from a farm and ranch background and didn't even know it, you know, on some jobs. So that is really interesting. What about the keeping your hands off of stuff? How do you
Oh,
do that?
yeah. I don't. So there I struggled really early on as a platoon leader because platoon leaders are supposed to be managers. And that's the lowest level you can be as an officer in when you're leading soldiers. So you can do staff jobs and stuff like that, and you're just responsible for your task or whatever you're told to do. But as a leader of soldiers, that's the lowest level you can go, is the platoon level. And uh, for me, my platoon, I'm a medical services officer, so my platoon was full of about 40 to 45 medics at any given time, and I had multiple echelons that I coordinated. So um, I'm within an infantry battalion, and I have 4 sets essentially of medics that are attached to various companies that are within this battalion, and those guys all support companies that are roughly 100 to 120 people, and so they're attached to those guys. And then I also have a treatment section that that they're there only to take care of soldiers who are sick or injured and do sick call and stuff like that. That's their only job, treat patients. And then I had another echelon that was evacuation, and their entire job was to take a sick or injured casualty and move them wherever I needed to go, on the battlefield or in real life and something like that. And
That's
so
it.
that's it. And so I can't do all of that. Not
Right.
only am I skilled as a medic to be able to take care of a soldier, I'm not a doctor or anything like that, um, but I might be able to help like move things and stuff like that. So early on, when we would do, we would lay out equipment to check it and stuff like that. Uh, I would start moving things, and one of my older NCOs would walk over and go, sir, come here. And I'm like, what's up? And he'd act like he wanted to talk to me, and he pulled me over to the side. He's like, okay, now sit. And I just stood there, and he's like, watch. And that was the thing. Like I realized like that's what they were trying to teach me over the course of like 18 months was stand where you're at and start doing the finger pointing. We always joke, oh, there's grandpa or there's grandma getting their finger sore from pointing. And
Right.
and that's what I had to become, and that's what I have become now. It's taken time, but I've finally gotten there. But at the same time, being involved, it, I'm a little too involved, I would argue, but it's a good thing because I know what I'm doing. So when I'm talking to somebody, I can intelligently speak on a specific object or a
Right.
specific task that they're doing. Like, hey, they're doing this because of this reason, and this is why I told them to do it. So that has been, having a little more hands-on than what a normal leader might do has been beneficial. It's a pain in the butt to my guys because sometimes they felt like I was micromanaging them, and we finally got, after 2.5 years of being a platoon leader, I finally got to the point where there's a good relationship there. And like, hey, sir, I got it. I'm like, okay, we're good. Or hey, I need you to start doing this, and I kind of get into the weeds and be like, oh, okay, sounds good. And then I knew when to back off. It was kind of like with the horses,
Yeah.
check them, but don't stay in their mouth. And it's one of those things that there's a fine balance there, and the managerial skills are probably what the Army has taught me more than anything, of being able to coordinate and talk things through rather than just do it myself.
Well, that's kind of interesting because when I become a supervisor, you know, I was always a worker and never wanted anybody to do my work, never left my work for anybody else.
Yep.
You know, I never wanted anybody to ever even say that, oh, they had to do something because I left it. No, no. And so then when you become a boss or supervisor over people, you're like, okay, you need to do this, and here, let me help you, or watching them struggle with something and then go ahead and give them a hand, you know, physically, you know, turning a great big valve on something. And those guys would be appreciative of that. and they would never say anything, especially if it was hard and it was hard work. It was great. But you touch a small valve, something easy, the union will grieve you every time, but they'll never do it when it's something,
Yeah. Yeah.
something that's going to really benefit them. So
Well, and you bring up
it's a little different than what you're talking about, but it's still the same thing where it's hard to stand by and watch somebody do something when you know you could be helping them.
yeah, and that's another thing too, is you bring up a point that kind of takes me back to another spot is uh, in the Army, you're not supposed to really go over a year and a half to 2 years in a position. I was in my position for 2.5. I was looking at 3 potentially, but I saw the writing on the wall and I was trying to get to where I needed to go in my career and in the other things, personal reasons. I was trying to move on. And about 6 months prior.
But part of that was also that you were doing the job of 2 or 3 different people because they're shorthanded, right? It wasn't because you
No,
had nowhere to go, right?
no, not that particular job.
Okay.
But that was my next one.
Uh,
The no, the thing was, I was looking at 2 years. I knew within the next 6 months I should be gone, and it ended up coming to fruition. But I started making what the Army, I don't know if anybody else calls it this, but we call it a continuity book. And it's just simply, here's the lessons learned. Here's all the information I know that I can put into paper for you and make it as
mm,
easy as possible for you to take the job over if I never meet you. And here it is. And that's what happened, because I came into the platoon with no platoon leader that had been an actual medical guy. It was an infantry guy, and he didn't know what he was doing. He was just a fill-in for a month and a half. He was just a
not his
body.
fault.
No, not his fault at all. And it was actually a friend from
Uh,
Montana State. And he's like,
oh, yeah,
hey,
I remember you mentioning that.
yep. And he said, hey, there's a position that I'm in that I'm about to leave and go do my actual job. Are you interested in this? I was like, absolutely. So knowing he was there was kind of the draw that pulled me in. But there was nothing in that organization to show me what to do. There was an
Okay.
NCO, my counterpart, who's like, hey, this is how you do it. And he showed me the ropes over the course of about 3 months. And I started learning basic stuff on how to pull reports and get information and push it up to higher. But that was it. There wasn't really anything with medical planning, operations, stuff like that. I had the bare bones training from my officer training school. And and that was just absolute minimum. And then you start finally over 2 years getting all this information, the lessons learned that you gain from exercises and stuff like that. And it was all internalized. It kind of like what you've talked about before. It was all in my head. I finally go, man, the end's almost here. I know it is. I need to set up the next guy for success. And that was something I learned from a guy named Tim Wright at my bullet, my basic officer leadership course, right before I became a platoon leader. And he said, always make sure you're setting them up for success later on, not just when you're there. I'm like, yeah. So that's what I try to do is I put that book together, and I literally left him a binder this thick. And it had all the information. It had a bunch of stuff that I had previous products that had been created, so they didn't have to reinvent the wheel. And what's funny is I left all my contact information in there. Said if you ever have questions, call or email. And the guy that came after me came about a month later, and he said, thank you, this is great, I really appreciate it. And then it's been a little over a year now. He's been replaced since then by another guy. And that guy reached out to me via email a couple weeks ago and said, hey, I just got all your stuff. Is there any more that I could potentially get? I was like, yes, there is. It's all in digital format. And my NCO that is still there has all of it. Talk to him. And that was the last I heard. But it's letting people get the information and then also show them the ropes. So like that was the first part. And then I had other people that we knew. I had a lot of stuff on my plate that I did. My counterpart, and now a very good friend, Keith Kittle, he said, hey, you need to start figuring out how to teach these younger medics how to do stuff so that when you leave, it doesn't just stop. Like you're
Yeah.
so I did a couple of things. Like in the mornings, I would do it my way, make sure it was done in case it didn't get done in time. And then I would spend the time at the end of the day and have them come into the office, and they sat in my seat on my computer doing my work, and I watched them over their shoulder. After I'd showed them already, I had them sit right here. I was like, watch. And I showed them, talked them through it. I said, all right, now it's you the next week. And they did it, and they started going through it. And it was a painful process to watch them because I'm like, this can go so much faster. There's a
Well,
more
because it's
efficient
learning.
way. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's what it is. It's just me repetition, muscle memory, and everything like
Yeah.
that. And they finally figured it out. And I think that was the big thing, is letting them the people you're trying to teach figure it out on their own. Show them, help them, and then let them go. That was the big thing.
So basically, you learned that from ag life too.
Yeah.
It's really, I mean, isn't that not? I'm listening to you talk about this like, yeah, okay, I see myself doing that, or not enough of this or too much of that, but you know, it's the same process.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's good. Well, should we put that out to pasture?